What if I told you that the team that seemed to have found the key to dominating the new era of Formula One is now on the verge of losing everything? Mercedes arrived at 2026 with a brilliant technical advantage, hidden in a gray area of the regulations, capable of giving it more power, more performance, and potentially absolute control of the championship. But what they did not expect was the immediate reaction of Ferrari, which not only detected the trick, but also unleashed brutal pressure on the FIA to stop them. And this is where everything changes, because the FIA has intervened, and what was previously completely legal is now being limited and practically prohibited in the middle of the season. This not only puts Mercedes' innovation in check, but also threatens to destroy the balance of its entire technical project. The big question is inevitable. Are we seeing the end of Mercedes' lead, or the start of a much bigger crisis within the team? Stay until the end, because what is happening behind this scandal not only redefines the regulations, it can completely change the future of Formula One. Mercedes wasn't playing the same game as everyone else. She was playing better. While most teams focused on optimizing what was evident within the new 2026 regulations, in Brackley they went a step further, finding an interpretation that, on paper, fully complied with the regulations, but that in practice gave them an advantage that could mark an era. Everything revolved around a seemingly technical detail without much impact for the average viewer: the engine's compression ratio. The regulation was clear, a limit of 16:1, but with a key condition that changed everything. That measurement was carried out cold. And that's where Mercedes saw the opportunity. Because when the engine enters real racing conditions, when it reaches temperatures close to 130 degrees, that same design allowed the compression ratio to be raised to figures close to 18:1, something that not only improves combustion efficiency, but directly translates into more power. We are not talking about a minor improvement, we are talking about an estimated gain that could be around more than 10 horsepower, enough to make constant differences in qualifying and racing. In a Formula One where distances are measured in thousands, this was a brutal advantage, silent and extremely difficult to detect without deep analysis. Most shocking of all, when the FIA checked the engine under its standard protocols, it found absolutely nothing illegal. Mercedes complied with the regulations. It was legal. It was perfect, at least in appearance. And this is where the real problem begins, because as soon as this information began to leak into the paddock, the reaction was not admiration, it was alarm. Ferrari quickly understood what this solution meant. If it didn't stop, Mercedes would not only have the advantage, it would have complete control of the new hybrid era. And that was something they were not willing to allow. From that moment on, what was a technical advance became a top-level political conflict. Ferrari, together with Honda and Audi, soon organized coordinated pressure against the FIA, questioning not cold legality, but legitimacy in real race conditions. The narrative changed completely. It was no longer a question of whether Mercedes was complying with the regulations, but rather whether it was exploiting a loophole that broke the spirit of the regulations. And in modern Formula One, those types of debates rarely stay technical. They quickly escalate to championship-defining decisions. The tension grew to the point of forcing urgent meetings before the start of the season, something that makes the magnitude of the problem clear. Ferrari was not only defending its competitive position, it was leading a battle that sought to rewrite the rules of the game before Mercedes could capitalize on its advantage. And the most important thing of all is that they were achieving it, because the FIA, under pressure from multiple manufacturers, had no choice but to intervene. And this is where the scenario begins to become critical for Mercedes. Because when a team bases part of its performance on such a specific solution, any change in the interpretation of the rules is not simply an adjustment, it is a structural blow. Adapting that engine to new measurement conditions not only means losing power, it means redesigning concepts, compromising efficiency and, in the worst case, sacrificing reliability. Mercedes went in a matter of weeks from having a potentially dominant lead to facing the real possibility of losing it before even consolidating it. The FIA's decision was not simply a technical adjustment, it was a declaration of intent. Because when the governing body decides to intervene before the season even begins, what they are saying is that the situation has gotten completely out of control. And that's exactly what happened here. The pressure exerted by Ferrari, Honda, and Audi not only managed to cast doubt on Mercedes' solution, but also forced the FIA to act with unusual speed, introducing an amendment to the regulations that completely changes the rules of the game. This new measurement approach, proposed in progressive phases, is not coincidental. It is a way to nip in the bud any advantage based on differences between laboratory conditions and real race conditions. In other words, the FIA is saying, it is no longer enough to be legal in the cold, now you have to be legal in any scenario. And that, for Mercedes, is a gigantic problem. Because its advantage was not on paper. It was on the track, in those real conditions where the engine reached its maximum potential. This is where the situation becomes critical. Adapting an engine to a new form of measurement is not something that is done overnight. It is not changing a part, it is not adjusting a parameter, it is rethinking fundamental design concepts. And when we talk about power units in Formula One, we are talking about extremely complex systems, where each element is optimized to the limit. Changing a variable such as the compression ratio under operating conditions can trigger a domino effect that affects thermal efficiency, consumption, power delivery, and even reliability. Mercedes, therefore, finds itself at a very dangerous crossroads. If you decide to keep your original concept, you run the risk of failing to comply with the new interpretation of the racing regulations. But if you decide to adapt completely, you could lose the advantage that justified all that development. And the most worrying thing is that these types of changes not only affect the present, they affect the entire engine evolution cycle, limiting its ability to improve throughout the season. Meanwhile, Ferrari has gotten exactly what it wanted. Not only has it slowed Mercedes' progress, but it has forced its rival to enter a phase of technical uncertainty just at the most critical moment, the beginning of a new regulatory era. This completely changes the balance of power. We are no longer talking about a dominant Mercedes, we are talking about a vulnerable Mercedes, exposed and forced to react instead of imposing conditions. And there is an even more important detail that many are overlooking. Although the FIA has introduced these changes to balance the situation, there is no guarantee that all teams will be affected equally. If Ferrari, Honda, or Audi did not depend on this type of solutions, their impact will be minimal. But for Mercedes, which had built part of its lead on this interpretation, the blow may be disproportionate. This opens the door to a completely different scenario, where the team that seemed to have everything under control could now be starting from behind. This is the moment where the narrative completely changes. Because it's no longer about whether Mercedes was smarter than everyone else. It's about whether she can survive the consequences of being smarter than others. And in modern Formula One, where every detail is under constant surveillance, crossing that line between innovation and loophole can come at a high price. The real problem for Mercedes is not what has happened. It is what is coming now. Because when a team loses a technical advantage before the season even begins, it doesn't just lose performance, it loses control. And in Formula One, losing control of development is the most dangerous thing that can happen to you. Mercedes now faces a scenario where every decision counts twice as much. It has to redefine its engine, adjust its concept, and do it under pressure with the rest of the manufacturers watching its every move. But there is something even more critical: time. In this new era of regulations, the scope for development is limited, meaning any missteps are not easily corrected. If Mercedes doesn't quickly find an alternative solution to compensate for the loss of that compression ratio advantage, it could find itself stuck in a position where it is no longer leading, but chasing. And in the meantime, Ferrari is exactly where it wanted to be. Not only has he neutralized his main rival, but he has changed the entire board. Now it doesn't need to be more innovative than Mercedes, it just needs to be more consistent in an environment where everyone starts from a more equal base. That's the real victory here, turning a technical disadvantage into a strategic advantage without needing to touch the car. But the most worrying thing for Mercedes is the internal effect that this situation can generate. Because when a project is built around a key idea and that idea disappears, the entire team goes into a readjustment phase. Engineers who have to rethink solutions, simulations that are no longer valid, development plans that lose meaning. This is not just a performance issue, it is a structural issue that can affect the team's confidence in their own technical direction. And this is where the great unknown that can define this entire story appears. Did Mercedes have a plan B, or did it bet everything on this solution? If they had alternatives in development, they could still react and stay in the fight. But if not, if they really built their advantage around this concept, then we are facing a much more serious scenario than it seems. Because we wouldn't be talking about losing a few tenths. We would be talking about losing an entire season at the most important moment of the regulatory change. The FIA has closed the door to that gray area, Ferrari has won the political battle, and now Mercedes has to show if it can survive without its greatest weapon. Because in Formula One, the difference between dominating an era and disappearing in it is often decided in moments like this. And what we are seeing here is not just a technical controversy. It is the turning point that can define who really rules in the new Formula One. The story of Mercedes at the beginning of 2026 is the perfect example of what modern Formula One really is. Not only does the fastest win, The one who best interprets the limits wins. 4 months, the German team did exactly that, finding a brilliant solution that, within the regulations, gave them a real advantage on track. But the moment that advantage came to light, it stopped being just engineering. It became politics, pressure, and a battle that cannot be won only on the circuit. Ferrari understood before anyone else that this was not just about performance, it was about stopping dominance before it began. And he got it. The FIA intervened, the regulations changed, and Mercedes lost the weapon that could have defined an entire era. But the most important thing is not the ban itself. It is the moment in which it arrives. Because it happens just when the teams are building the foundations of the new generation, when each decision has long-term consequences. Now Mercedes is in a position where it cannot fail. It has to react quickly, reinvent part of its concept, and do so without losing competitiveness against rivals who, at this point, have already managed to level the playing field. And in these types of scenarios, the difference between a champion team and one that is left behind is not speed. It is the ability to adapt. So the big question that remains is not whether Mercedes went too far, but whether it can recover in time. Because what started as a brilliant technical advantage can end up being the mistake that marks your entire season. Let me know in the comments what you think about all this.